You're listening to the Point. Ready or not, let's keep it real at Turning Point.
More often than not, the unexpected happens. Life comes with real challenges. The reason we're here is to have those hard conversations, to grow, and ultimately to realize we're not alone. Ready or not, let's start understanding more about the darkness of minimizing and protecting your offender from a woman who has been there, overcome, and is now helping many other women. So welcome to The Point. I'm your host, Debbie Taylor, the Executive Director, along with my co-host, Sherry Love, who is our Nurse Manager, and Nikki, of course, always on the headset. And with us today is Pat Acosta, who is from Casa, and going to share their services and just talk to us a little bit about what that is like and maybe help some of those that are out there listening today. So welcome and thanks for being with us.
Thank you. I'm very, very happy to be here.
It's so awesome to have you because we do a lot of in-services, a lot of trainings, a lot of people come in and give us information, but you stick with us. Just your passion, your energy for what you do, your love of helping women get out of bad situations. I don't know, you are just one of the most inspirational women I think we have in this community. So
thank you.
I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about just kind of some of maybe the statistics or what you see as far as, women in relationships that are not healthy. I love whenever you talked about the darkness, the minimizing and the protecting, the defender.
I think it's important for people that are listening to us to realize and go back to when a relationship starts. That's why it's so difficult. You don't expect the person you marry, you don't expect the person that you make a commitment to spend the rest of your life, or the person that you love and even trust to one day turn on you and put you down. Maybe you shared with that person your deepest secrets or experiences that you might have had, and for that person to throw it at your face without any sense of caring is probably where it starts. And so domestic violence, for starters, is a very complex crime. And we need to talk about it as a crime because a lot of people as a society minimize it.
We do. We've become more accepting.
Absolutely. We've done so much. We've come along. I could talk to you for a whole hour on laws and how it's changed, yet it's still a hidden epidemic. And the reason it was hidden is because none of us, nobody out there wants to talk about something that is so private. And so when we speak about minimization, one of the things statistically that I see a lot, and I've had the privilege, I've worked in Texas and California and now here, and one thing that resonates to me is women don't want their spouses, their offenders, their partners to go to jail. They want the abuse to stop. And let me go back and say not just women, because I think the biggest myth that is out there is that only women are the victims, and that's not the case. More and more men are coming forth and they're talking about the abuse. Of course, one of the things that we need to realize is men don't come out as easily as women just because of the stigma that society places on them.
Because they're supposed to be strong and able to handle it all. And yeah.
So now that we're seeing more men come to shelter, and La Casa is a very unique and I want to say progressive program in that I have worked with programs that are very confidential and the way the women come. For example, there's some shelters that you cannot come to the shelter until you're escorted by law enforcement, just for protection.
Wow.
There are other shelters that will not take any walk-ins. It's only by phone, just because you never know if the offender is around for the protection. La Casa has been very open. I've been with La Casa now 10 years, and I remember the very first week I got there, they would take walk-ins 24/7. And so that can be a very dangerous thing because you never know where the offender is. And one statistic that I will give you that is very valid is when the woman leaves or when the victim leaves, men or women, they're at their dangerous moment because that's when the offender feels that they have no control. They see that they're very determined, and that's when the risk of getting killed escalates. So that's a very important thing, that when you work in this field, you need to understand that it takes a lot of courage for the women or the victim to say, enough, I gotta leave. And that's when their life is more in danger.
Right. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the biggest thing that brings women to that point of saying, okay, that's enough and I'm going to get help? Do you see kind of consistent thread there, or?
What I've seen over the years is oftentimes women are survivors in the sense that they put up with a lot, and I feel that they tolerate, but whenever something happens to their children, that tends to be like, you can do anything to me, but don't go with my kids or don't touch my kids. And whereas that is great, it's still not where we would want to see the victim, because we want them to do things for them.
Yeah.
And we know that if they feel good about themselves, if they are in healthy relationships, then their children are going to be happy, because at the end of the day, kids are not very picky. I think we create children and we give them all these things because a lot of the times there's guilt, rather than having healthy environments and environments where kids just want to laugh. When you're in an abusive relationship, your children see all this, and it really impacts it. And I finally had to say, the true victims are the children. They really are. Because even if a victim is going through some, let's say, battered women syndrome, where she can't get out of the cycle, every time she goes back, every time she leaves, it makes the situation worse every time she returns. Because the cycle of violence is just a matter of time. And as the child gets older, then they're going to start resenting that. And when they get to be preteens, they'll let it be known. They either get abusive with the offender, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same offender. There's been cases where children report to us that mom has been, let's say, in 6 relationships or 4 relationships, all of them abusive. So can you imagine all the trauma the child has lived with every single offender that they witness? And if it's with a biological parent, it's very tragic, because we see a lot of children ages 13, 14, sometimes killing their own fathers at that point where they had enough. So domestic violence, that's another thing we need to talk about. It's not just an issue impacting the couple. It's an issue impacting everybody that lives there with them, and the society as well. When I was a social worker at detention facilities with youth, 80% of my cases came from broken homes where domestic violence was the number one factor. Mm. And so you start looking. And so that's why when I do presentations, I always let the community know, you know what, we are all allies. If you go back just 20 years ago, people would see somebody get beaten, just turn around, walk away, because it's none of my business. We are now seeing more of the domestic violence calls being generated by anonymous callers, neighbors, not necessarily the victim, which is also not good. But at least the call's being made. We've done some
somebody's paying attention, and they should be. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. And so when you talk about the kids, we were talking about this a little bit before, that we always justify, well, the kids aren't around, the kids don't hear it, they're not. And we kind of concluded that that's never really the case.
Well, that's a great point that you bring up, because one of the things that we do when we conduct either a crisis hotline assessment or an intake, one of the things that surprised me over the years, and it still does because it's still happening, is the victim will talk a lot about the actual abuse, and a lot of the times they report, of course, the emotional, the verbal, and if there are physical signs, they'll let us know about the physical. They start minimizing because a lot of the times they're afraid that the person might lose their job or go to prison or go to jail. So there's a lot of that fear. The other factor could be there's hope. He's going to change. I'm just going to give him a little scare. I'm going to go to the shelter just for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. But then they go back and they realize it's all over again. When we get to the children, there's a question that most shelters will ask and says, were the children present? Because we want to then assess how much has the children been exposed to. And it never fails. Women and men often say, either or, whoever the victim is, well, you know what? He's a great dad. Even their voice changes when we're asking that question. It's just amazing, Oh no, whatever he does, he just does it to me. He's abusive to me. He's verbally abusive, puts me down, belittles me. But when it comes to the children, he is the perfect dad. He's a good provider. And we just listen to that. And for many years in this field, we were taught or trained. You listen, you document, and you give the victim the benefit of the doubt. And that's still something that we still very much do. But we also need to take opportunities to teach and educate. And so we started shifting from whenever someone would say something, at least whenever I have an intake and someone starts saying that to me, I will pause and I said, let me go back. You just told me, let me see if I got this right. You just told me that he tends to be pretty good, but on Fridays you see him change. He He tends to go drinking. He comes and starts making a fight to leave. And in the process, he belittles you, calls you all these profane, horrible names. And you just told me the children are not there. But what time does he get home from work? Oh, well, around 4. So where are the children? So you kind of put a perspective of what they gave you. You don't want to make them feel judged, but you want to put them in perspective. And with victims, a lot of the times we blindside ourselves or black out. So you just bring the whole scenario of what they share. So that's why it's so critical that when you're doing an intake or you're speaking with a victim, even if it's over the phone, that you really listen. Mm-hmm. Listen to their journey, listen to their story, because whereas we're going to gather the same data, the way that you do it, I don't follow the form the way that it is. Based on the conversation, I might go around. At the end of the intake, I'll get all the questions answered, but it's the approach. And so when they are asked, were the children present, and they say all these things, then I pause and I say, well, earlier you told me this, and then they give me this look like, yeah. I said, he doesn't really deserve to be called a good father, because if he's going to belittle and put down the mother of their children, what message are we giving the children? And it's like a little green or a little light bulb goes on. And then a lot of the times they get very emotional because it's then that they realize they've been minimizing. Right. And it's like I told you earlier, when you put the children in the whole puzzle spectrum, it's like they can handle the pain themselves and justify as much. But when now it's affecting their children and someone is pointing it out to you, it changes a whole scenario.
It's like that little mama bear.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so that's a way that we start addressing the minimization. And it's very effective because you're not doing any blaming. And then you say, you know what, we just wanted to point out, because after we finish, right now our focus is to help you reach your goals. And then you go into what are your goals for this short period of time? Because your journey has been now, you made the courageous call of calling and saying, I need to go to a place that is safe. And then I always take the time to say, why La Casa? Why not the rescue mission? Why not? And they say, well, aren't you supposed to be a place to help, to be safe? I said, yeah. I said, but the person that's going to have to work the program is you, not us. And I want you to understand if you really know why you're coming here. And I think this is a good thing to also point out. In the crisis line, we often get, let's say, a mother calling. And you can feel the desperation, and she'll say something like, I'm calling on behalf of my daughter. You need to help her. She needs to step out. It's getting worse. I know she's not telling us, but I suspect, or I know this, and we listen, and then we have to say, ma'am, your daughter has to go. Because as much as you want to help her, the victim has to be ready to make that step.
Yeah, you can't do it for them.
You can't.
So what does it look like when they call?
The victim or the mother? The victim.
The victim, yeah.
Oftentimes, I always feel there's a sense of I hit bottom. There's a tremendous sense of isolation, fear. Fear is very present. Fear of the unknown, fear of him probably doing something that will hurt her because there's been threats. If you ever leave me or if you ever say anything, I'll come and finish it. Think about an undocumented woman that is going through the domestic violence and has been threatened, and he is a U.S. citizen. If you ever report me, I'll get you deported. So there's a lot of that we see. So fear is a big factor, a sense of desperation. I just need something now. There are a great number of callers who really don't know what the shelter will offer. So there's a sense of, well, tell me what you offer. I want to know what you're going to and how you're going to help me, because I'm not going to leave. It's that kind of, they have one foot out the door and one still inside.
I got to know where I'm stepping.
Right. That's majority what we get. And then you have those callers that have had many separations in the process. And there's a different feel to that. It's like, I don't care. I just need to get out. And oftentimes we have to be that's why the listening aspect is so important, because they'll say yes to everything. Yes. And did you understand this? This is what we offer, blah, blah, blah. They just say yes because they want to go to any place that can give them a safe place. You also have the callers that maybe waited too long and then get evicted as a result of domestic violence. That desperation call is a little bit different, because they're like, where am I going to keep my kids for the next night? I can't take them to a rescue mission. And then the fear of when they hear shelter, there's a perception and a vision of a shelter. They immediately correlate it to a big open gym area with maybe just some mattresses thrown in there. So there's a lot of not knowing where they're going and is it worth it? And those are good questions because you have women that have, I remember not too long ago, we had a client with 6 children and she was coming from another state. That's another factor. Yeah. And then she was asking questions like, will he charge me with kidnapping because I'm going to cross to another state? And so you have to be ready to educate them on that. Well, are there any custody orders that you need to know? Are there? No, but okay, so have you made police reports? That's very important because a lot of victims will not make police reports. Where do you start the paper trail? So we have to sometimes get all that information because it might be hindering. They might be able to charge them with something else. There was a case in California where the woman fled. She was actually fleeing Texas, wanted to go to California, but there was custody paperwork. She could not remove the children from the state. And so if the staff that took the call wouldn't have known that and asked that question, she could have. So what we recommended is, you know what? There's a shelter closer to your community within the same state. Let us advocate for you. But for now, take care of this. And then if you choose to leave out of the state, don't let that cling to you because he'll follow up and put charges and it'll make it worse. Once you start dealing with the legal system, it's harder. And so sometimes we can hinder our clients more. So I think one of the things that you learn with domestic violence is listen, listen, listen. Don't feel you're invading. If you ask the questions that are in the best interest for that particular case, then you're going to be okay. And if you don't know the answers, you just flat out say, you know what, I really don't know, but give me an hour or give me, there's a national hotline that's based on in Austin, Texas. They have superb people. Anytime that I've gotten stuck, I always call them as my reference. Excellent. Excellence.
Nice. And so is there any qualifications or anything that a woman has to do? If she shows up on your door, do you guys take her in?
We still have to do a crisis assessment. We need to confirm and verify that she is indeed a victim of domestic violence. We have had chronic homelessness. People come to our doors. And once we do the assessment, if we determine there's no DV because there's been cases, then we do the proper referrals. We still have an obligation to ensure that person gets a place, whether it's through another facility. There's also been cases where a woman would call and based on what she's disclosing, let's say she lives in Las Cruces, and based on what she's disclosing, her spouse might be involved in gangs or he knows where La Casa is and he's told her, oh, if you go there, I'm going to do this or whatever. And so once we do that assessment, we say, you're a really high risk. Casa is not the safest place for you just because you and others. So we start talking to our friends in Deming and in Alamogordo at Cope and then we tell them, you know what, this is what we recommend would be, we do a safety plan. Of course, at the end of the day, it's up to the victim. It's up to the caller, what they decide to do. But we got to have options.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you tell a woman or a victim, male or female, that's listening today and they're contemplating calling, they're just kind of right on that precipice? What would you say to them?
The first thing I would say is go with your instinct. Nobody knows your offender or your situation better than you. Know that there is help out there, but you have to be ready. And maybe making the call just to see what your options are is a good start. Because if you're not ready to leave, we understand that for some victims, it might not be the right time. We ask them to safety plan, start getting your papers in order. You have birth certificates, start putting them aside. If the situation has escalated more so in the last couple of months, safety plan with your children, come up with a code word so that if you have to leave, what to do. If you trust a neighbor, let the neighbor know. There's a whole that goes on with the safety planning. So I would just say, have the courage to make that call and see what your options are. And then when you're ready, make that decision.
Is there a way to get more information on that safety plan? Like I love when you said the code word between the kids. Like I wouldn't have thought of that. So is there... We have
a new residential director who's amazing. She's had a lot of experience doing this. And we just recently, modified our forms and created new safety plans. And so we can definitely help you if you're interested as an organization. We can come and give you a training. There's different safety plans that can be generated. We also have safety plans for children. And we now started servicing children 3 years as opposed to 5 years and older. And there's safety plans that you can do with their little hands. You just have them draw a little hand, and then every finger represents a person that they trust. And what does a trust person is? Who is a trust person? Could be a teacher, could be a grandma, could be, because in some families, grandma might not be the person to trust,
Right.
It all depends.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be the biological or paternal grandmother or the maternal. It could also be the same maternal grandmother. We've had cases where I remember a victim calling. She says, my family love him and they support him. But the reason they do is because he financially supports all of us. There's a lot of that. And so, there's different safety plans. They need to be unique to the person, even the child. So we can definitely help you with that. And so for callers, for people that are listening, based on your situation, then we can even do a safety plan over the phone.
Oh,
So,
wow. Okay, that's an incredible resource. And what number would they call for that?
They would call the 526-9513, which is our hotline number. And that's open 24/7, 365 days a year. So we're there. Our main number for La Casa is area code 575-526-2819. And that's for any general questions, wanting to speak about programs or speak to a particular staff member. But the first one I gave you, 526-9513, is directly to the hotline.
Okay, awesome. And if you're out of this area, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is a 24-hour confidential and anonymous service for survivors, victims, and those affected. And that number is 1-800-799-SAFE.
Safe.
And you can also do online chatting at hotline.org, or you can even text Love Is to 22522 if you're having questions about whether you're in an abusive relationship. And then there's a great one that has quizzes and chats, and that's called loveisrespect.org. So those are a few more resources. Pat, you are just amazing. I love how you do what you do. I can't say I love what you do because we shouldn't have domestic violence, but the fact that you are just so in there and, I don't know, such a big heart and so much passion for it.
And let me say something for the national hotline. They are amazing people. And one of the beautiful things about that hotline is you can call just to talk to them. There's always someone there. And also they can refer you to programs within your city, your state. And they also have different people that speak different languages. Awesome. So it's really good.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. And typically you're talking to somebody who's been where they've been as well, too. Yes. So, we were talking earlier, we think sometimes when we're talking to somebody and they're helping us, or, that everybody has just had this great life and they're all put together. But, again, why we started the podcast, everybody has a past, everybody has a story, and everybody's overcome something. So find the courage, go to loveisrespect.org, take those quizzes if you're questioning, if you're not questioning and rewind this, call those numbers. And again, Pat, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, it's been great. And if you were intrigued by what you heard today, don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram for the latest updates about this show. And as always, remember, stars can't shine without darkness.